The ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza is officially over. Overnight, Israel carried out extensive strikes on Hamas targets, and the IDF is deploying and readying to take strong action against Hamas. Israel says the return to war is in response to the failed ceasefire talks and Hamas's refusal to release more hostages, and was done in full coordination with the White House. We have ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian standing by on the Gaza border with all the details, but first, let's take a look at the dramatic developments.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz have instructed the IDF to take strong action against the Hamas terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip, officially ending the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Overnight, the IDF struck multiple targets throughout the Strip in an operation dubbed Strength and Sword. The operation, which was conducted in cooperation with the Trump administration, targeted mainly mid-level Hamas commanders. The IDF says it now stands ready to expand the fighting, and on Tuesday issued evacuation warnings to Palestinians residing along the border, calling on them to evacuate dangerous combat zones, including in the towns of Beit Hanun and Khan Yunis. According to a statement put out by the Prime Minister's office in the early hours of Tuesday morning, the return to fighting follows Hamas's repeated refusal to release the hostages, as well as its rejection of all the proposals received from U.S. presidential envoy Steve Witkoff and the mediators. 59 hostages remain in Hamas captivity. Netanyahu's office said that the IDF is attacking Hamas targets in order to achieve the objectives of the war, as they have been determined by the political echelon. They include the release of the hostages, both living and deceased. The statement added that Israel will from now on act against Hamas with increasing military strength. And not only Hamas. Overnight, the IDF also struck Hezbollah terror targets in Lebanon. The IDF has maintained that Hezbollah continues to breach the terms of the ceasefire and vowed it would act to remove any threat posed by the Iranian proxy. And in Syria, the IDF attacked several military targets in the south of the country, including military headquarters and sites containing weapons and military equipment of the fallen Assad regime. The IDF said in a statement that it will not allow a military threat to exist in southern Syria and will act against it. The overnight strikes throughout the region send a clear message to Hamas, Hezbollah, and most notably the Islamic Republic of Iran, that Israel will not stop until all the hostages are returned home and the so-called axis of resistance no longer poses any threats.
And the Home Front Command is changing protocols for communities that live along the Gaza border after the resumption of war began overnight. ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian is on the border of Gaza with more.
Lidar, I'm standing less than a mile away from the border of Gaza right now. Specifically, I'm at a lookout point here in the city of Sderot, where you can pretty much see all of northern Gaza behind me. Now, since being in this location, I haven't seen any smoke in the distance. I haven't heard any booming noises, but you can clearly see the destruction of northern Gaza. Now, the city that's located inside of Gaza, that's right over my shoulder here, is the city of Beit Hanun. This is one of the cities the IDF just announced that people need to evacuate from as they signal some type of expansion when it comes to this ground offensive that they just launched overnight. Of course, here on the Israel side, people are also acting with caution as the Home Front Command has changed protocol. Residents who live along the Gaza border woke up to loud booms as Israeli airstrikes went off in the Gaza Strip. And because of the return to war, the Home Front Command updated safety guidelines for communities who border the Gaza Strip, transitioning them from full activity to limited activity. The Home Front Command says educational activities in the area are not permitted, and gatherings inside of buildings are now limited to 100 people. Outside gatherings are now limited to 10 people.
Yeah, so we had kind of a distressful night. We heard the sound of bombing in Gaza. We woke up to it, and it was like a reminder of the last few months that we had before the ceasefire. And you know, first of all, our thoughts were to the hostages and their families, and what's going on with them and how it's going to affect their release, because that's like our main goal. And secondly, if we're going to come back again to war times, it affects our lives and our children, and none of those thoughts are happy or hopeful. But we understand that it's a tragic game, and we have to trust the military and their actions. and we believe that they're doing their best to defend us and protect us, and also to do what they can to release the hostages. So if it's necessary to bomb or use some force, and if that's the main goal, and we believe that that's the main goal, then we have to live with it and do our best to wait and see how things are evolving. Yeah, we've been living here in war status for a year or so, and there's been ceasefire for the last 2 months or so in order to release the hostages, and that's the main goal, and that's what's most important for us, first of all. After that, of course, that we want to live here in security and peace, and we're going to stay here and hold on and do whatever is necessary in order to make life here better. And if we need to go through another phase of war, so be it. We're here. And if the goals are going to be achieved, and we believe that they're going to be achieved, then we will stay here and do whatever is necessary on the community side of things.
Lidar, of course, this is disrupting life, as we said, for so many people who live on the border of Gaza. Remember, people are just starting to come back and to return to their homes, specifically on the kibbutzim that had massacres on them on October 7th. People have started to go back into their homes, clean it up, and try to resettle there. So all of this, of course, is a big disruption for people just trying to reset their lives. Lidar?
Thank you, Shosh, for the reporting from the Gaza border. And joining us now with the latest developments on the end of the ceasefire is Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies and a former IDF spokesperson. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So a surprise attack by the IDF on Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip. What can we expect moving forward? And are we heading for a full ground invasion again?
Well, if Hamas continues to refuse to hand over hostages and to do so quickly and in significant numbers, which I think, unfortunately, is how Hamas will respond, then yes, I think it is likely, almost very likely, that Israel will be forced to expand its military operation, which will include continued and enhanced aerial attacks on Hamas infrastructure and targets, personnel and locations, and special forces and ground forces that will maneuver inside the Gaza Strip, searching for hostages and trying to launch hostage release operations, and of course targeting Hamas, their senior leadership, their infrastructure, and really their centers of gravity. I think that if that happens, then we will be seeing a very different type of Israeli military action, not like what we've become accustomed to seeing over the last 1 year and 2 months, the first year and 2 months of fighting. It'll be stronger, more decisive, more violent, more kinetic, and Israel will use many more tools at its disposal that Israel was prevented from using in the past.
And, I have to ask, what does this mean for the hostages now? The IDF has said it will not strike where hostages are being held. So what does this mean in terms of, once again, being able to eliminate Hamas?
Yeah, I think that I very much understand the concern and the grief and fear of families of hostages that see this Israeli decision as a threat to the well-being of their loved ones. We have 59 hostages left. 24 of them are still presumed to be alive, and each and every one of them must be returned home. And I can understand that the current developments are a source of great anguish for those families and that are waiting to get their loved ones back. However, I unfortunately also believe that at this current state, there's very little else to do. To continue with a ceasefire that doesn't bring any hostages home and allows Hamas to rearm itself and plan attacks against Israel and to consolidate and enhance their control over the Gaza Strip is a very bad and dangerous thing. And since Hamas has been emboldened by the Egyptian proposal, the Egyptian counteroffer to President Trump's directives, and emboldened by European support and Arab support, perhaps mistakenly, Hamas believes that if they just hold on for enough time, Israel's will to fight and spirit will be broken and they can get away with murder. I think that Israeli decisions now indicate differently. Israel is not going to allow Hamas to regroup and to stage attacks. And if the Hamas doesn't return hostages, then Hamas will pay an increasingly high price until it is destroyed. Will that mean that the lives of the hostages are at a higher risk? Sadly, probably yes. And that is the horrible, almost impossible situation that we find ourselves in. But going forward, with Hamas's refusal, I don't really see other options. I hope Hamas would be convinced of the severity of the situation and immediately release, as an act of goodwill, release hostages to show that they mean business. If they don't, I think we're going to war, and a different type of war than what we've seen in the past.
And can we expect the other members of the so-called resistance, Hezbollah, the Houthis, other militias in Iraq and Syria, to also start attacking Israel again? Are we looking at another multi-front war?
I'd be surprised to see Hezbollah return to fighting because they have a lot on their plate and they're not in a good strategic position, but you never know. I don't think that the Iranians have any assets left in Syria, and I think that the Iranian assets in Iraq are weakened and disorganized, which leaves us with the Houthis, who are under quite significant American strikes, but they still retain missile and drone capabilities. I wouldn't rule that out. I think that there's a high likelihood that the Houthis, even just for the sake of sending Israelis to shelters and sounding alarms in Israel, will make efforts to dispatch drones and fire ballistic missiles at Israel. If they do so, Israel will be forced to respond. And what I really hope is that Israel will change the strategy and the calculus when it comes to the Iranian axis of evil. And if any additional Iranian proxy strikes Israel, then that should be interpreted by Israel as an act of aggression by none other than the Islamic Republic of Iran. And then Israel should respond accordingly and strike the Islamic Republic of Iran.
So we know this attack was in full coordination with the United States. President Trump has warned Iran, saying he knows full well the Islamic Republic of Iran is behind all of these attacks. Is a joint U.S.-Israel strike on Iran imminent, in your opinion?
I wouldn't say imminent. I think that there's still a preference for diplomacy and an attempt, perhaps a last minute. In soccer terms, we're on the 90th minute and the referee just announced the amount of overtime. And in baseball, it's the 11th inning, deep in it. And we're still looking for and trying to find a diplomatic solution to get Iran to open up inspections of all of their nuclear facilities, to disassemble all of their infrastructure, and to have it removed from Iranian soil, and to have a clear oversight of anything that happens in Iran. If they don't agree to that, and if they don't agree to it immediately, then I think that we are running out of diplomatic runway, and that the chances for such an Israeli or American or joint action against Iran is becoming more likely. I wouldn't say that we're quite there yet, but I think that the last days' actions and statements by the U.S. president definitely bring those closer.
All right. Well, Jonathan Conricus, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your analysis today.
Thank you.
For generations, owning a home in Eretz Yisrael has been a cherished dream, one of faith, heritage, and belonging. Now, with Sparta Real Estate, that dream is within reach. From the spiritual heart of Jerusalem to the vibrant Jewish life of Vernana, the seaside beauty of Netanya, or the energy of Tel Aviv, Eliyahu Kleinman will guide you every step of the way. With beautiful homes at various price points and all bureaucracy handled for you, it's never been easier. Scan the QR code now, and Eliyahu will personally help you find your home in Israel.
And tensions have not only escalated in Gaza, but throughout the Middle East, with the United States directly confronting Iran and its Houthi allies in Yemen. President Trump has issued a stark warning holding Iran accountable for any future Houthi attacks on international shipping in the Red Sea. ILTV's Ariella Lechiani reports.
The United States carried out its third consecutive strike against the Houthis overnight. For months, the Houthi rebels, backed by Iran, have been disrupting vital shipping lanes in the Red Sea, threatening global commerce and provoking a series of escalating responses. On Monday evening, US President Donald Trump declared he is holding the Islamic Republic of Iran directly responsible for these attacks. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said, "Every shot fired by the Houthis will be looked upon from this point forward as being a shot fired from the weapons and leadership of Iran, vowing dire consequences." The Houthis are part of the Axis of Resistance, an anti-Israel and anti-Western alliance backed by Iran. As part of the ongoing strikes, the Pentagon reported dozens of Houthi military casualties and no credible indication of civilian casualties, despite Houthi claims. The strikes are intended to degrade Houthi capabilities and secure vital shipping lanes.
This is also not an endless offensive. This is not about regime change in the Middle East. This is about putting American interests first.
Adding to the volatility, Reuters reports ballistic missile movement at the IRGC bases in Iran, raising concerns of further escalation. And in an additional dramatic development, Saudi sources now claim that a suspected Iranian intelligence ship, the Zagros, was sunk by US forces. This alleged action coincides with the US attacks on Houthi targets, indicating a coordinated response. The situation remains highly volatile, with the potential for further escalation. The US is determined to protect its interests and secure the safety of international shipping. The coming days will be critical in determining whether the region descends into a wider conflict.
And in other news, why is there still no U.S. ambassador to Israel? Mike Huckabee's Senate confirmation hearing for the position of ambassador to Israel has been delayed again. Joining me in the studio to discuss the controversy is ILTV's executive editor, Maayan Hoffman. Maayan, what's the story? I mean, what is the holdup?
Well, Lidar, it is actually relatively strange that we still do not have this ambassador, especially considering that Mike Huckabee was nominated as one of the first nominees back in November, on November 12th. Now, the hearing, from what I understand, was delayed a few times. The last time was supposed to be March 13th. That was last week. And here we are. It's now delayed until March 25th. Now, the delay is controversial. It's unclear exactly why it's been delayed, but the, let's call it rumors of people close to the White House have said that this is because of the Democrats pushing against Huckabee being in place, largely based on complaints by the American liberal Jewish community, which has said that Huckabee is a controversial figure. They're concerned, number one, about his position of a Palestinian state. Huckabee, as you know, is pro-annexation of Judea and Samaria and against the decision to have a Palestinian state. In addition, there's concern about his theological and eschatological, honestly, views. The concept of the end of days, they feel that he's a Christian extremist and actually could harm, the state of Israel. Now, Christian evangelicals, of course, are pushing back, as well as some right-wing or religious Zionist Jews. We've seen a number of statements, letters to the Senate coming out in order to protest this delay. Most recently, there was a petition. It was put out by the American Christians for Israel. That's being disseminated now, scheduled to go to the Senate to ensure that there is no more delay next week.
So it's actually really quite surprising that the opposition is coming from the liberal Jewish American community. That's not where you would expect it to come from.
That's right. I mean, it's really fascinating. I mean, I think the truth is you would somewhat expect it to come. It's mostly from Reform Jews. There are about 2 million Reform Jews that these rabbis who sent their own letter to the Senate about 3-4 weeks ago complaining about Huckabee. They sent this letter. They protested in some open op-eds to Huckabee's position. You know that there's actually quite a large divide, both between, the liberal Jewish community and what we would call the religious Zion, or the more conservative Jewish community right now in the United States. That more conservative community is siding with the evangelicals and certainly wants to see a figure like Huckabee be put into this position so that annexation, or what they call sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, can move forward.
And I think this current administration here in Israel would also very much like to see Huckabee arrive. He's been a great friend to Israel.
Yeah, I think it's without question. Again, he would be the first evangelical Christian, ambassador to come to the country. As we know, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is quite close with the evangelical community. He's even made statements in the past stating that the evangelicals are Israel's best friend.
And so do you believe that Huckabee will ultimately get the nomination?
I do believe he will, and I think that this is a controversy that is actually not controversial, that in the end, although it has been pushed off, what I'm hearing from sources very close to the White House is that the nomination will go through, and in fact, he will be put in place. The issue is that Israel urgently needs an ambassador here on the ground. It would have tremendous impact on people like Envoy Steve Witkoff coming here and managing his visits to the region in order to move forward those hostage and other negotiations, certainly in light of the new airstrikes that took place today in Gaza.
Absolutely. All right, Maayan Hoffman, thank you so much for the story.
Thank you.
And in other news, positive news, Alphabet, the parent company of Google, has reportedly agreed to purchase Israeli cybersecurity startup Wiz for over $30 billion, making this the largest acquisition in Google's history. It's also the largest acquisition of an Israeli-founded company in history. Wiz is a startup founded in 2020 by Israeli cybersecurity experts and headquartered in New York in the United States. In this short time, it has emerged as a leader in cloud security services. So congratulations to Wiz, another successful and innovative Israeli startup. And the situation in Israel is constantly evolving, and despite the return to the fighting in Gaza overnight, we have the privilege of hearing from Yael Eckstein, president of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, as she shares with us a recap of some of the important headlines from before the return to war. Let's take a look.
Shalom, my friends, from here in the Holy Land. I'm Yael Eckstein, and here are 3 things that you should know about Israel this week. Number 1, with a war update. This past week, there were over 1,000 people murdered in Syria. Many of these, over 300, were Christians. The rest were Alawites. The fellowship stands with persecuted Christians throughout the region, across the Middle East. Everyone should know about and be talking about and praying for the persecuted Christians in Syria and across the Middle East. Number 2, with some positive updates. President Trump recently welcomed 8 released Israeli hostages to the White House. They had the opportunity to tell the president firsthand what they endured in Hamas captivity. The one thing that they asked President Trump was to continue to work as hard as he can to free the remaining hostages. And number 3, with some fellowship updates. Earlier this week, I was in the southernmost city of Eilat, where the fellowship inaugurated a new MRI machine to the hospital Yoseftal. This is the first MRI machine in Eilat and for the entire southern Israel region. Now, in southern Israel, there's an MRI machine thanks to the love and support of Christians and Jews around the world. Well, there you have it, friends. There are 3 things that you now know about Israel. Join me next week, same place, same time, for more updates on what's happening in the Holy Land. Shalom.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of around 14 degrees Celsius or 56 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see partly cloudy skies and rain expected in Jerusalem, alongside steady temperatures with highs of 21 degrees Celsius or 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Madar Gravelazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.